You're a teenage girl named Margot, barely 15 years old, standing barefoot on scratchy straw inside a cold, damp cottage in the year 1347. Tonight, you're a bride. Not because you chose to be, but because your father traded you off for a few pigs and some barley. Your new husband, Henrik, who's old enough to be your uncle, is walking slowly toward the straw-stuffed bed. His boots crunch the floor, and the flickering candle throws dancing shadows on his lined, rugged face. Your heart's pounding like a drum in your chest. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below, and please like the video. Thank you. You're wearing a rough wool night dress, itchy and hand-stitched by your mother, who wore it herself years ago and got it from her mother. It's a family heirloom of unfortunate wedding nights. Outside, you hear rowdy voices. His friends are gathered, shouting dirty jokes and banging spoons on pots, already drunk. They won't leave until they're sure the marriage is official. Your fingers tremble as Henrik reaches for the leather string tied around your neck. His hands are rough, like he's never known anything soft. The air in the room is heavy with the smell of damp wool, sweat, and smoke. You try to remember what your mother told you about your wifely duties, but nothing could truly prepare you for this moment in a tiny, dark room where childhood ends and something else begins. This isn't some medieval romance. It's not a tale of love. It's a window into the harsh truth of sex and marriage in the Middle Ages. A time when what happened in bed wasn't driven by passion, but by fear, superstition, and the iron grip of religion. Before we uncover these forgotten pieces of history, tales of survival, silence, and strange customs, go ahead and hit that like button if you enjoy exploring the uncomfortable truths from the past. Subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love how people from all corners of the world come together to learn about our shared human story. Back then, the bedroom wasn't a safe place. It was a battlefield, a space where flesh became property, where spiritual rules collided with old folk beliefs, and where even the most personal acts were judged by the church, the village, and the threat of eternal damnation. Nothing was simple. Nothing was private. Every choice, how you touched, when you touched, what position you used, was watched by invisible eyes and heavy with meaning. These weren't just acts between lovers. They were tied to family reputation, religious punishment, and even survival itself. Let me take you to the world of Margot, a girl just 15, married off in the fall of 1347. Her wedding wasn't marked by joy or celebration. It was a trade-off, a deal sealed not with love, but with her body. And in her tiny village, neighbors had every right to listen at the walls, waiting for sounds that proved the deed was done. There was no concept of consent in marriage. Wives were property. Menstrual blood was believed to poison fields. And sex in the wrong way could send your soul straight to hell. In medieval Europe, what happened between husband and wife was never just between them. It was everyone's business, especially the churches. And it tells us more about that world than most history books ever will. The medieval wedding night didn't start with sweet whispers or soft music. It began with something far more bizarre, and honestly a little horrifying at IT was called the bedding ceremony. After the feast, the guests didn't just say good night and leave. Nope, they marched the bride and groom to their bedroom, physically dragged them, tore off their clothes while belting out dirty songs, and then waited outside the door. Why? Because the marriage wasn't considered official until they heard it happened. Henrik's drunken friends wouldn't leave until they heard young Margot cry out. The sound that was supposed to confirm her virginity had been taken and the marriage consummated. That wasn't just tradition. That was law. But hold on, medieval intimacy gets even stranger. See, the church didn't exactly approve of pleasure, even for married couples. Yes, you were allowed to have sex, but only under a mountain of rules. Theologians like St. Jerome once wrote that if a man loved his wife too much, he was no better than an adulterer. That's how suspicious they were of desire. Thomas Aquinas, one of the biggest religious thinkers of the time, laid it all out in his Summa Theologica. Here's a quick summary of what not to do in bed. No sex on Wednesdays, Fridays, or Sundays. No sex during Lent, Advent, or other holy seasons. No sex if your wife is on her period, pregnant, or breastfeeding. No oral sex. And definitely no creative positions. Man on top, face to face only. Anything else was considered a crime against nature. If couples followed all those rules, they'd only get about 50 legal nights a year. Margot would have grown up knowing these laws. Her mother would have whispered them after confession. The village priest would have confirmed them from the pulpit. This was more than just religious talk. It was the looming fear of eternal hellfire. Every touch came with the risk of damnation. Oh, picture this. It's a Wednesday during Lent. Henrik wants his wedding rites. But Margot knows it's forbidden. What does she do? Say no and face the rage of a man who legally owned her? Or say yes and risk her soul? Back then, refusing your husband wasn't a right. In fact, domestic violence was not only legal, it was expected if a wife didn't obey. And at the heart of all this was a twisted idea of what women were. Medieval medicine, heavily based on ancient Greek and Roman myths, taught that women were just imperfect men. Flawed copies, cold, weak, leaky, and only useful for bearing children. This wasn't love. This was survival. And it's only the beginning of what medieval intimacy really looked like. In the medieval mind, the female body wasn't just mysterious. It was misunderstood in the most absurd ways. Doctors back then believed women were built like men, just inside out. The vagina? That was simply a penis turned inward. Ovaries? Internal testicles. This wasn't fringe nonsense. This was mainstream medical science, taught at Europe's top universities. And the impact of these ideas? Massive. Because if you saw women as incomplete versions of men, it shaped everything, especially how you understood their sexuality. A famous doctor named Constantine the African, writing in the 11th century, claimed women needed long, intense stimulation and multiple orgasms just to get pregnant. From that twisted logic came a horrifying belief. Rape couldn't cause pregnancy because the woman didn't enjoy it, and without pleasure, conception was impossible. So if a woman got pregnant after being assaulted, medieval courts often saw it as proof that she must have wanted it, that she was somehow partly to blame. This was the world Margot inherited. Her mother might have warned her about something called the wandering womb. Yes, that was a real medical diagnosis. Medieval doctors thought the uterus could literally roam inside a woman's body. If it drifted upward, it might choke the heart. If it slipped too low, it could fall out entirely. The symptoms? Hysteria, madness, even sudden death. The treatments? Equally wild, they'd burn sweet-smelling herbs below the waist to coax the womb back into place, or hold rotten-smelling substances near the nose to scare it downward. Basically, medieval aromatherapy with a dark twist. And if you think the church cleaned up these ideas, think again. Despite their efforts to control women's bodies, older pagan beliefs about fertility and pregnancy never fully disappeared. Village wise women, later called witches, kept secret knowledge passed from mother to daughter. They brewed herbal teas to help women conceive, avoid pregnancy, or increase the chances of birthing a boy. Out in the moonlit woods near Margot's village, women would gather plants like pennyroyal and tansy, natural birth control with one deadly downside. The line between a safe dose and a fatal one was razor thin. And then there was mandrake root, prized for its strange, human-like shape. Worn against the skin, it was thought to boost fertility. So valuable was the root, medieval markets were flooded with fakes, carved from bryony, a less magical cousin, but shaped to fool desperate buyers. In the end, medieval beliefs about the female body weren't just wrong, they were dangerous. They defined how women lived, how they suffered, and how their pain was dismissed or punished. And Margot, like millions of women before and after her, had no choice but to survive inside a system built on silence, superstition, and control. The church might have officially banned magic, but in reality, faith and folklore often walked hand in hand. Even the most devout Christian women couldn't fully give up the old ways. The line between a prayer and a spell was paper thin. A woman could kneel in church clutching her rosary, asking Saint Margaret to protect her during childbirth. then go home and quietly bury a piece of afterbirth beneath her doorstep to boost her chances of conceiving again. She might wear a crucifix over her gown, and beneath it, a secret charm, a smooth piece of amber tucked between her breasts to guard against miscarriage. This was medieval contraception, a dangerous cocktail of superstition, desperation, and poison. Some women were told to jump backward 7 times after sex to stop a pregnancy. Others drank wine mixed with ground-up bees. Sounds ridiculous now, but that was the best they had. More extreme remedies were far worse. Some potions used mercury, lead, and crushed minerals so toxic they didn't just stop a pregnancy. They could kill the woman outright. And yet, many still took the risk. Why? Because the consequences of an unwanted pregnancy were terrifying. In a time with no safe birth control, sex could be a death sentence. 1 in 3 women died giving birth or shortly afterward. Every pregnancy was a roll of the dice. And if you were unmarried, pregnancy didn't just risk your life, it destroyed it. You could be cast out of your village, shunned, punished, or worse, in these situations, infanticide, though outlawed and condemned, became a whispered, tragic choice. Everyone knew it happened. No one openly spoke of it. But behind closed doors, desperate women made impossible decisions. Marriage wasn't a romantic union. It was a negotiation, a power deal, a survival pact. And women's bodies? They were the battlefield. Deals were struck like military campaigns, dowries, land, livestock, but the real currency was a woman's fertility, her ability to bear sons, her capacity to survive childbirth, her obedience in bed. This wasn't just about love. It was about control, about legacy, about life and death. And for women like Margot, every prayer, every potion, and every secret ritual was a small act of resistance, a fragile attempt to take back just a little power in a world where so little belonged to them. When Margot's father arranged her marriage to Henrik, he wasn't just giving her away. He was trading her virginity, the most valuable part of the deal. In medieval society, purity was worth more than gold, more precious than land, and more desired than livestock. A young girl's hymen was seen as proof of family honor, a bloody receipt exchanged between 2 households. The wedding night wasn't a private moment between newlyweds. It was a public trial. The whole village waited and listened, eager to confirm the marriage had truly begun to be why mourning. The sheets were the final verdict. If they were stained with blood, they'd be proudly shown to the guests like a victory banner. Clear evidence that the bride was untouched and the marriage had been made real in both the church's eyes and the gossiping mouths of the village. But if there was no blood, that was a disaster. The bride could be returned like damaged goods, her reputation shattered. She might be shamed, blamed, or even beaten. In extreme cases, women were killed for tricking their new families, all because of one unstained sheet. The pressure on girls like Margot was unbearable. Some tried to fake the evidence. They'd prick a finger and let the blood drip onto the bed. Others stashed animal blood beneath the mattress, praying no one would notice. All of this anxiety rested on a terrible misunderstanding. Medieval medicine taught that the hymen was a solid barrier, a tight seal that had to break during sex. If it didn't, they assumed she had already been with a man. But in reality, the hymen is a thin, stretchy tissue, and not every girl bleeds. Some are born without one at all. Others might lose it from riding horses, climbing, or simply living life. It's never been reliable proof of virginity, but that didn't stop society from demanding it. And the church? It took things even further that a marriage wasn't valid until sex had taken place, and not just in secret. People needed to know it happened. Sometimes the couple had witnesses. Sometimes they were just expected to make enough noise to satisfy everyone listening. Love had nothing to do with it. This was about control, honor, and appearances. Girls like Margot didn't own their bodies. They were used as contracts, sealed not with signatures, but with blood. This wasn't romance. This wasn't choice. It was a system built on blood, silence, and control, where a young girl's worth could be measured by a stain on a sheet, and her future decided before she ever had a say. For Margot, and for countless women like her, Marriage wasn't the beginning of a love story. IT was the end of freedom. And in that cold, smoky room, beneath the weight of expectation, superstition, and survival, history was written on bodies that never got to write their own.